Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome. My name is Udoaka Mimo. It's an honor to moderate this high-level panel on the critical matter of jobs for African youth, from demographic dividend to economic dividend. For those of you who'd like to share this discussion on social media, please use the hashtag AFDBAM2016 and hashtag jobs, the digit 4, youth. Yeah, jobs for youth. So as you can see before you, we have a great lineup of distinguished panelists, all of whom are involved in some way in addressing this issue. Over the course of the next hour, they will share their experiences and expertise with us. This conversation is anchored in the African Development Bank's commitment to improving the quality of life for the people of Africa. Why? Because, as the author Charles Dickens once wrote, we live in the best of times and the worst of times. Best of times because we will continue to be the youngest region of the world, and that means the most energetic, the most exuberant, the most vibrant. Worst of times because youth and energy can also be destructive if unwisely harnessed. Think about the people dying to migrate in search of better opportunities or picking up guns and suicide belts. And so, because there's a lot of collective wisdom at the African Development Bank, I'd like to invite the bank president, His Excellency Dr. Akina Deshino, to share his thinking around the Jobs for African Youth strategy.
Thank you all very much. Let me thank the panel for being here, in particular to appreciate Dr. Carlos Lopez, the Executive Secretary of United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Of course, Mo Ibrahim, it's great to see you and all the great things you've done always for Africa's youth. And Tony Elumelu, who's a great philanthropist, but also investor in Africa and a firm believer in the future of Africa's youth. And the Governor Sibohan from Germany, who is also very passionate about it. Let me thank you all for coming here. I'm not going to be long, but let me just tell you a story. Just about 2 weeks before I took over my function as president of the African Development Bank, I decided to go to Senegal, to go to the place they call Gorée Island. And for many of you that know Gorée Island, that's where the slaves were taken off, tied and thrown into boats, and that was it. And there's a door there, they call it the door of no return. And I stood at that door of no return. I had all the emotions going right through me as I thought about the fate of those that were taken as slaves and packed into boats like sardines and shipped outside. And I went back into my car and I sat down there. But then I started thinking, how can it be that during that time, so many left against their own volition? But how can it be that today, so many of our young people, on their own, look for rickety boats, get on top of it, to flee to Europe, by themselves? And you have 3,500 died at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. I asked myself the question, as I took over my position as president of the African Development Bank, no. We have to turn the demographic asset of Africa into a dividend. The future of Africa belongs to the youth. And those youth have to be trained today, given opportunities today, so that they don't have to escape from Africa. That's not where the future is, I don't believe at all. I believe the future of Africa is utilized within a more prosperous Africa, a more inclusive Africa, an Africa that supports youth entrepreneurship, skills development, that has a financing system that believes in the youth themselves. And that is why at the African Development Bank, we decided to take on this particular issue. If you look at the unemployment rate today that we have among our youth, it's a crisis. Africa is in a job crisis. I'm not going to bother you with the numbers because you know them, but it's a job crisis for Africa's youth. Boko Haram in Nigeria picks youths and uses them. Al-Shabaab is the same. Everywhere you go, the terrorists are using young people, and that's because they are disenfranchised. They have no jobs, they have no hope. If you have no hope and somebody gives you money to go and throw a bomb, they go ahead and do that. So unemployment crisis among Africa's youth, it's the most serious challenge that Africa faces today because it will accelerate social, political, and economic fragility of Africa's African continent. And so we've got to solve that problem. And that is why the African Development Bank, and Sunita, where are you? Sunita is here? I thought I said, yeah. And thank you. Please clap for Ashi and our team have done a fabulous job. And Kapil Kapoor and all the others, the team members, to develop this strategy that we launched here, we're discussing with you. It's called Jobs for Africa's Youth. This particular strategy, we are going to help to create employment for 25 million young people over the next 10 years. It will be a way that we address the rural-urban drift of our youth, also a way in which we address our youth fleeing the continent. I don't think the problem is in Europe. I think the problem is the nature, the structure of our growth pattern that is not inclusive in creating jobs for young people on the continent. That's where it is. I can take a lot of help from outside, but I believe the solution is not outside. The solution is right on this particular continent. And some of the things that we are going to be focusing on in this strategy are as follows. First is to look at agriculture, because this is where you have a lot of young people. And when I was Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria, Tony would tell you, I always loved my bow ties. Reason, agriculture is a business for young people. Today, you go across, I see lawyers, doctors, engineers go into agriculture as a business. That is why the African Development Bank, as part of this strategy, have what we call Enable Youth Initiative. And that Enable Youth Initiative is to turn our young people to look at agriculture as a business. As I've said, we can have oil, we can have gas. Nobody drinks oil, and nobody smokes gas, and everybody eats food. And agriculture, when you are there, I believe the future millionaires and billionaires, the future Mo Ibrahims and the future Tony Elumelus of this world are not going to come from oil and gas industry. They are going to come from a more modernized agricultural sector with our young people actively engaged in that. The other sector that we are looking at is ICT. And you all saw Kevin Doe today and several others like him that are in this hall today. Our young people are talented. So we want to tap into that talent to help them to develop digital literacy, computational skills, coding. They can code for employment, so employers can employ them as you see the fourth industrial revolution going. We are also going to be investing in dealing with the skills gap that happens between kids that are leaving university and the needs of the labor market. They don't have the skills. The jobs may be there, but they don't have the skills. So part of this strategy is how to close that gap. Vocational training, technical training is going to be very, very important as we look at this. And finally, it's the whole issue around financing. It doesn't matter how great your ideas are. If you don't have access to money, you can't really move forward. And so the African Development Bank is putting forward a facility that is going to leverage for our young people's businesses on this continent $5 billion. And this will allow them to be able to incubate their businesses. We have private equity funds that can put around them to support them to become successful businesses. We want Africa to be filled with successful businesses by our young people. The future of Africa's youth, as I said earlier this morning, do not lie at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. It lies in a more prosperous, inclusive Africa. And your presence here to dialogue with us on that strategy as we listen to your thoughts, and also as the great leaders that are on this table share their thoughts about what we can do. I'm sure that we can solve that problem. I'm very optimistic that at the end of this particular session, we will have been enriched, and that you, the young people, will feel that the African Development Bank is not a distant bank anymore from the young people. It's a bank that's going to be close to the young people because the future belongs to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Adeshina. So I hope that the Jobs for African Youth strategy is one that we will all engage with. So I will now introduce our panelists, starting with, from Nigeria, the Vice President, His Excellency, Professor Oluyemi Osinbajo. From further afield, Germany, His Excellency, Mr. Thomas Silberhorn, who's the Parliamentary State Secretary in the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. His Excellency, Dr. Carlos Lopez, a one-man think tank, actually, but he's the Executive Secretary for the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Mr. Tony Elumelu, the Chairman of the Tony Elumelu Foundation and Heirs Holdings. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Mo Ibrahim, Chairman of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation. So from the countries, and starting with Nigeria, Professor Osinbajo, the latest statistics I saw talked about a 50% unemployment rate for the youth of Nigeria, and which is 3 times the general unemployment rate. How exactly is your administration intervening in this problem?
First, I think you're probably right that youth unemployment is about 50%. And the Nigerian youth population is about 70 million, which is about 35% of the youth population of the whole of Africa. So what we will be doing will be important, not just for Nigeria, I imagine, but for the absolute figures for Africa as well. And what we've decided to do is to take a several-pronged approach. The first is, because there is an emergency, we are looking at creating some jobs directly, some direct creation of jobs. And in this particular budget cycle, we are creating 500,000 jobs. And now these are jobs that we want to start by creating a volunteer teacher corps. And we're recruiting 500,000 unemployed graduates who will not just be trained to be teachers, because we expect that their training as teachers is as volunteer teachers, as teaching assistants. It's not meant to be permanent work for them or anything, but it's first of all to provide them an opportunity to work at something. But at the same time, we will be teaching we'll be training them in several technology type work. For instance, what we expect to do is that this teacher corps will be trained as programmers as well. Some will be working as extension farmers, extension workers in the farms. Some will be trained, in various aspects of technology. And we expect that not only will they be able to assist as teachers, but they would also, on their own, be able to do other types of, engage themselves in other ways as time goes on. But the part of this that's important is that they will be paid, while they're working for the next 2 budget cycles at least, they'll be paid. So they're engaged and they're being trained, actively during the period. We also are looking at a lot of work in the general area of technology, training in technology. We're establishing 2 hubs, 2 ICT hubs, 2 major hubs, and 6 regional ICT hubs. basically to provide opportunity for young people who want to be programmers, who want to be animators, who want to be, in some cases, just business processing, business process outsourcing, candidates for business processing.
Okay, so I have volunteer teachers, I have ICT hubs.
Yes.
I've heard about a grant, a
Yes.
stipend for unemployed youth,
Yes.
5,000 naira, about $50.
No. That's actually not for unemployed youth. That's actually for the poorest. That's a conditional cash transfer.
Okay.
And that really addresses cases of extreme poverty. The young people who we're looking at, the direct creation of jobs is the 500,000 volunteer teachers.
Okay.
And of course, ICT as well is an area that we're looking at. Okay. We're looking at training 65,000 young people in various ICT skills, and we're partnering with quite a few technology companies that are interested in
Thank
this.
you. Her Excellency Sahar Nasser, the Minister of International Cooperation for Egypt, has joined us. Welcome. We've just started, and what I'd like to hear from you is Egypt's experience in intervening in the high unemployment rate that you have, and I believe yours is in the higher 20s, about 26%, 29%.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be on this panel. Job creation is a key priority for the government of Egypt. In fact, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has announced the year 2016 as the year of youth. There are several interventions that have been made. In fact, unemployment rate in Egypt is around 12%, but it's higher among youth and women. And our areas of focus is youth as well as women, because the rates are even higher among young girls. We're working on several fronts. So on one front, there is a major economic reform program that has just been discussed at the parliament and has been ratified by the parliament that aims at attaining inclusive and sustainable growth, including youth. We're focusing on lagging regions, especially through developing small and medium enterprises as well as micro enterprises. And I want to here acknowledge the excellent work that the African Development Bank has been doing along with different development partners, the World Bank, EBRD, European Investment Bank, and several bilaterals, and as well as the Arab funds, which focuses on lines of credit to improve access to finance. There's a budget deficit. There has been some crowding out, so the lines of credit are of great support there. But more important is the vocational training and the skills, the technical assistance that has been packaged along with the line of credit, because there is a bit of mismatch in the labor market, so it's very important that the young people are provided with the required skills that the market needs. We're also promoting a lot of regional projects, because if you want to scale up, it's very important that you go beyond the local market, but also, and that is why we're very keen on more integration with the African countries and with our continent, because we see that as of great potentials. So youth is a priority, and creating jobs for them will be one key element also to fight terrorism and violence in our nations, and it gives them better hopes and a better future, and I think that in itself matters a lot.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Mr. Silberhorn, I'll come to you, because Germany is somewhat contrarian in Europe in its approach to the migrant crisis, ensuring that migrants also get the benefits of your dual training program. Share with us your experience of both the dual training program, but also of incorporating the migrants into this.
Yeah. Thank you. First, I wanted to say that youth unemployment is not only about young people. It's about the stability of each country. If you have millions and millions of unemployed young people, this could destabilize countries and regions. And that's why it has to be a top priority for each country to invest in education and to facilitate and improve doing business environment. You mentioned the migrants coming to Europe and Germany. I come from Bavaria, one of 16 states in Germany. We have 12 million inhabitants, and our government, our state government, decided to employ additional 1,700 teachers for the migrant children who arrived in Germany, in Bavaria alone. Did anybody count and calculate how many teachers and classrooms will be needed when the population in Africa grows by 1.2 billion people in only one generation? So not everybody is at school at the same time, but maybe you will have about 800 million students from 1.2 billion additional young people that will be born in the next generation. 800 million students. If you take 40 in a classroom, you will need 20 million teachers, roundabout. Do we really address the challenge we are facing? So this requires really constant investment in education from the very beginning, and this lays the foundation for professional training and the required skills for getting a job. Additionally, I think we have to create an environment in which young people do not only ask for jobs, but do also get the skills and capacities to stand on their own feet, to do their own business. And that's why it's so important that, for example, according to studies of the OECD, most of the new jobs are created by small and medium-sized enterprises. So do not look always on how to get more attractive to big foreign direct investment. It's much more important to create a conducive environment for doing business in each society. And concerning the jobs initiative of the African Development Bank, I think these are the right priorities. ICT, agriculture, industrialization, in these sectors, there are great opportunities for new jobs. But if you allow, I just wanted to add one additional proposal. According to OECD studies or estimates, about 150 billion euros or dollars each year are exported from African countries outside. This is more than the international community provides in development assistance worldwide. So how to keep this capital inside Africa? $150 billion each year.
Okay, thank you. I just want to interject.
Where are the savings that could be reinvested for credits and loans to SMEs? And
Mr. Silberhorn.
Isn't my last sentence? Isn't there a role?
Actually, I'd like you to share with us your experience of the dual training.
Just the last question. Yes. Isn't there a role of multilateral development banks like the African Development Bank, not only to invest in projects here and there, but to create the environment in order to enable national banks, agricultural banks, SME banks to do this job, to take the higher risks, first losses that are needed to provide access to finance for many, many more people. Thank you.
Thank you. But you haven't told us how Germany intervenes, which is what I'm really trying to get at. Talk to us about your dual training policy.
Well, we established together with the African Union Skills Initiative just last year. We support many African partner countries in technical and vocational education and training, more than 30 countries in Africa. Of course, we have a broad experience in this TVET sector because it bridges the way from school to the jobs. It enables young people to get trained in practical terms, and it enables entrepreneurs and companies to get young people oriented to their business and trained in their entrepreneurial skills and experiences. So that's the way we did it in Germany for decades, and we have good experience in doing so. We have to find jobs not only for the academics, but also for people with non-academic qualification. Somebody also has to do practical work, and this usually is the broad majority in each society, and that's why we have to address this need in our economic sector for jobs here, and our Dividend programs address this need. This, of course, requires a dialogue, not only between government and schools, but including the private sector, including the experience of companies, in order to be able to address our programs to the needs of the market.
Thank you very much. We've just been joined by His Excellency, the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury in Kenya, representing the President. His name is Henry Rotich. And what's happening now is that we are hearing the different interventions that countries are making to address youth unemployment. We've heard from Nigeria, we've heard from Egypt, we've just heard from Germany. So Kenya, this was a key plank of the government's election campaign strategy, and it's a key plank of the administration, the cabinet that you serve in. Can you share with us what Kenya is doing to address the high rates of youth unemployment? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and apologies for coming late. And let me say that the President was very much willing to be here today, but he had to go back this evening. But as you know, he was here with us during the day. Now, let me just quickly share with you what we have done in Kenya with respect to this challenge. First of all, in Kenya, we have provided very many facilities for youth in terms of accessing financial facilities. We have currently 3 job funds: the Youth Enterprise Fund, the Women Enterprise Fund, and what we commonly known as the WESO Fund. These funds are providing credit facilities to the youth to access the many opportunities that we have also provided with respect to access to procurement, government procurement. As you're aware, in Kenya now, 30% of the procurement that is awarded by government goes to the youth. And this is one of the innovative interventions that the government has done. And aside from that, we also have revamped or re-engineered our National Youth Service. This is a service that has provided training to the youth, and the youth have been used to provide very many community interventions in Kenya. So, in a nutshell, what we've done basically is to support the youth by accessing markets, government procurement, giving them the necessary resources to supply government, and also training. So this has worked well. In addition to that, we have developed programs to enhance employability of our youth, particularly internship program, which we are working with the private sector to ensure that the youth are employed or enhance their employability by them being taken into apprenticeship with the farms. So this is what we are doing in Kenya, and we continue to do more. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Ibrahim, I'll come to you. Because you deal primarily with good governance. You reward good governance. How does governance play out in the policies we've heard from the different countries?
Really, the problem we have here with youth is a problem of governance and focus. This is the major challenge we have in Africa. I know I have very small time, really, so I'll try to be quick here. Let us talk. We're talking about building infrastructure in Africa as essential for regional integration, etc. We talk about investing, the need to invest $90 billion a year in Africa. We know there is some 60 billion maybe already mobilized or available for us annually to do it. Have we stopped for a minute to think who's going to build this infrastructure? This $90 billion a year of infrastructure to be built in Africa. When we have the lowest rate of engineers in the world, the lowest rate. In agriculture, 2% of our youth study agriculture. So who's going to build Africa? You know, when is the last time the education authorities, the government people, sat with business people to understand where jobs come from? What are the needs? We don't do that. And yeah, no, because that is essential, because we are going to lose a huge resource for us. And we are wonderful at wasting our natural resources, because youth is a resource, just like the natural resource. We export our natural resources raw, just like our young people who die in the Mediterranean. And we send them unprocessed. We don't add value to them. They do nothing to help us here or help others elsewhere else. That is a basic issue we need to deal with. And so we have to look at the issue of education and training in the context of what is the need of the economy. I don't want our young people to recite Molière or Shakespeare or, no. I want them to know how to build bridges, how to build roads, how to build the internet, how to treat people, how to build agriculture. We need that. And I like what the World Bank is doing, and I like your project about what you're going to do about the youth, but really we need to flesh that out and see how we're going to do that with the urgency needed. I don't see that urgency. And these millions of jobs, we need like 5, 6, 7 million jobs every year in Africa. Where is it going to come from? So we need to do something there. Agriculture, we keep talking about agriculture. We need to understand, and the World Bank need to show us or help us develop a new model for agriculture. Because I think subsistence agriculture cannot be the way forward. So how we build the new agriculture in Africa without kicking farmers out of the lands, as some people are doing, land grab, etc. We need a new model. Is it co-ops? Is it what? So we need really the experts here to show us what's going to do about this. I stop here to give a chance to my colleagues. Thanks.
I think President Deshina has actually taken up that challenge. So it will be interesting to see how this strategy rolls out. But Mr. Elumelu, from your perspective, as someone investing in young people, someone investing intentionally in creating jobs, you know, we hear about the formal sector, the informal sector. From Germany, we heard about, you know, the fact that there are academic jobs, there are non-academic jobs. So how does your initiative straddle that divide that we need, you know, a whole range of jobs on the continent?
I think first is I'd like to commend the ADB and the President in particular for this wonderful initiative. The solution to the problem of unemployment we have on the continent is going to come first from within, and two, from all of us working jointly. Government alone, I have heard you ask the respective government heads here what they are doing to deal with the issue of unemployment. Government alone cannot fix unemployment. All of us have to be involved in fixing unemployment. And we need to realize that the greatest threat that we face as a continent, because of what is called a demographic dividend, which can actually become a demographic doom if we don't deal with it very seriously. I believe that the way to job creation is through entrepreneurship. And that is why and what I've tried to practice. And I'll share with you a few practical experience in this area. We, in 2015, the Tony Elmelu Foundation, again, based on our belief, one, that no one but us will fix Africa, and two, based on our belief that the private sector can indeed work with government to address the issue of youth unemployment, we decided, I endowed, invested $100 million the next 10 years to deal with this issue of youth unemployment. It's open to all Africans, young Africans, from across 55 African countries. It's sector agnostic. Any sector, what is important to us is just your idea. And also, you don't need to be a graduate to apply. And so, first year, 2015, was quite revealing. 20,000 young African men and women applied, and we engaged the firm of Accenture to help us go through this and recommend the best 1,000 ideas to us, which they did. Interesting development, and referring to one of the comments just made, we found that 30% of these entrepreneurs are in the area of agriculture. And so it's telling me from a practical point of view that Africans are now embracing agriculture, and that is the case. And so we need to now see how we can support them more. Second year, we got more interest, 65,000. First year, let me say that His Excellency, the Vice President of Nigeria here, was kind enough to come in person to comment, to encourage these younger Africans, and his speech continued to reverberate across the continent. People watch it and they feel very excited about it. Again, this is one of the things we need to do to deal with the issue of unemployment. Now, the second year, 65,000 applied, and we selected 1,000 because it's $10 million every year for 10 years. That's $100 million.
Because you're trying to create 10,000 entrepreneurs, aren't you?
Yes, 10,000 entrepreneurs. But the challenge I have is this first year, 20,000 applied, we selected 1,000. Second year, 65,000, we selected just 1,000. So you have less than 2% being, that are successful. So if we, and I believe we are, serious about dealing with the issue of unemployment on the continent, first, as what has been said, big corporations actually don't create a lot of employment. One of our investments, United Bank for Africa, operates in 19 African countries, about 1,000 branches across Africa, yet we don't have more than 20,000 staff. But the small and medium-scale businesses, the entrepreneurs, and we have a lot of them on the continent with great ideas, they are the ones that will help us create employment. So since we have been able to identify some of these people, and if we also agree that it's a combination approach, I would recommend and use this platform to say that let Africans who want to help deal with this issue, realizing that government alone cannot fix unemployment, take from the list Accenture has, take some and give them support. Let our development partners who for decades have been trying to help save Africa, let them begin to realize that in the 21st century, we need a new intervention mechanism in developing Africa. We need to intervene in a manner that helps to create fishermen, help to create self-reliance, self-dependency, and not a perpetual syndrome of dependency on the giver. I believe that if we intervene from this perspective, and these people, what they need is not much. They need training, they need mentoring. We have mentors, 300, 400 mentors across the world helping them. They need seed capital, $5,000, $10,000, and it can make a difference. You talk to them, you see, this morning I spent time with the entrepreneurs in this country, in Lusaka, all great ideas. So we do have hidden assets that can help us truly develop Africa from within. What it takes is for us to give them little help, but government should help. One thing we must hold government accountable for is they need to help create the enabling environment.
Okay.
The entrepreneurs need the enabling environment to succeed. And if we do, all of us working together in this manner, I believe that when we have a forum like this, we won't be talking of what do we do. It will be a question of celebrating what has happened. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lumelu. So, Dr. Lopez, we'll come to you and then come to the floor for engagements. So you've heard an array of interventions, an array of experiences. From your perspective as Africa's economic think tank, what do you reckon is the most sustainable way forward? What does the bank need to consider as it rolls out its Jobs for Africa, African Youth Strategy?
Thank you. Thank you. I think first we have to admit that the odds are not in favor of labor being the biggest contributor for growth and economy, because it has been decreasing its size of contribution thanks to a number of developments, including technological, productivity gains, and so on. Some call it the fourth industrial revolution. I have a bit of suspicion about that terminology, but the most important is that we know that the contribution of labor to the composition of economies is decreasing. So here we are in Africa, getting into the business of trying to address this major problem at the time where the odds are not in our favor. The second odds that are actually very important for us to mention is that, contrary to perception, Africa has been creating more jobs than we normally estimate. The problem is that because we have a demographic curve that is so incredible, everything that we do in percentage terms doesn't look good. But in absolute terms, the number of jobs created is above the entrance in the job market so far, which means that we are making slight progress in terms of creating more jobs than the number of people that are seeking them. But in absolute terms, the numbers are astounding because the population is increasing so fast. So how do we correct these two curves is a big challenge. The third odd is that manufacturing, which is our number one bet in terms of creating jobs, modern types of jobs, is actually contributing to GDP right now in Africa, combined GDP of the continent, more than agriculture. Services is also contributing more than agriculture. But that's not, again, in real absolute terms of much help, because manufacturing value addition as part of the overall economy is slightly going down because, the number of people in the population is increasing so fast. So everywhere we turn, we are facing this dilemma. We have a lot of people coming into the stream, and even these very gigantic efforts that have been done so far look relatively pale to the challenge that we are confronted. So my issue normally is to try to do comparisons. And I looked into what was the situation in Southeast Asia when they faced not exactly the same demographic pressure, but very similar. And what we realize is very instructive for Africa. The first thing is that most of these countries, we're talking about Southeast Asia, they didn't have national youth policies. So we are now, it's very much fashionable to have youth policies, but they didn't have youth policies. Why? Because they felt that economic transformation of their economies was a response to the needs of creating job opportunities and addressing labor market pressure, but not necessarily by dedicating that to the youth. And I actually think this is very relevant for Africa, because when we say that we are having youth policies, who is youth in Africa? The youth in Africa is the majority of the population. So I think we have to have some programs for the aging people, like myself, because they are the minority. For the youth, we just need economic transformation policies, and then it will be taken care of. So this is a first lesson that I think is very important for us to bear in mind. If we are going to do that, we are going to be able to embrace much more sophisticated, determined, smart policies that require a very effective state. Now, this effective state is not to be confused with a controlling state, but rather a state that is very shrewd in trying to implement transformative policies. what would be one of those transformative policies? I'm not going to repeat the lingo about industrialization because a lot of you have heard me so many times about it. But I heard here in this panel vocational training. Okay, vocational training in Africa is about 2 to 2.5% of the students in the continent. 2 to 2.5% of the students in the continent. When the average in Southeast Asia, I go back to my comparator, is all above 15%. These are the low end, and most of the countries are close to 20% of the students. So we have a huge gap, huge difference that will allow for the training of our labor force to respond to the market demands associated with industrialization. And this is not happening. Is that a youth policy? For me, it's not a youth policy, it's an educational policy. Its educational policy is not in conformity with the requirements, as Mo Ibrahim was reminding us about the engineers. In fact, I can give you 2 examples of countries that have actually dealt with it. Mauritius, when they decided that they were going to enter into manufacturing instead of sugar production, they ensured that 50% of their students were in the universities, were in the sciences.
That's why they are number 1 in our table.
Okay. And then Ethiopia now has gone even further. It has required that all universities produce 70% on sciences. So I go back to my point. You need determination. You need policies that are in conformity with the various dimensions, not in isolation, one thing here, one thing there, and so on. We need comprehensiveness. And if we are dealing with comprehensiveness, then we are dealing also with issues that are collateral damage of a more active and dynamic labor market. And I'm going to finish with the point on migration because I'm very passionate about this. Because I'm seeing here President Kohler. Germany comes to mind, but a number of other European countries come to mind. You know, when there was the Marshall Plan, after the Second World War, the rates of growth in most of Europe were comparable to the rates of growth that we have in Africa right now. So it were astoundingly high. What happened then? A lot of Europeans, including Germans, migrated. Why were they migrated if their economies were doing so well? Today's migrants out of Africa every year are 2.9 million people out of Africa. You know how many are from China alone? Twice that number migrate out of China. But China is growing at over 7-8%. Why are they migrating? Because every time in history where there was steady growth, but with pockets of exclusion that were very high, the tendency was for one residual part of that population to try to migrate, to complement, you know, the opportunities that they have seen some taking, but did not reach them. So let's not mystify the issue too much. Migration is actually something that is going to happen even further if Africa grows more. We have now 1.2 billion people. We are going to be 2.5 by 2050. We are going to be the largest labor force in the world by 2036. And if we right now export, quote unquote, this raw 2.9 million, we can expect that by 2050 it will be at least twice. And I think what we can do is to do like the Philippines does. You know, they have the largest number, per capita number, of schools that train nurses. Not for the Filipino health system, but for the world health system. They export them. Period. They export them. And they have one of the highest remittances in the world. So I think a lot of the Africans that are actually migrating, if they were properly tooled they can not only contribute for Africa's transformation, but they can also return as the entrepreneurs that Tony Elumelu so ably is supporting. So that's my final point. I think we need really to create an ecosystem that responds to the challenge that we have in front of us, and not fragmented policies, because what we are talking about is transformation of Africa, which means the majority of the population of the continent, which means it's not about youth, it's about Africans, period.
So there's a lot to process in there, but we don't have time for processing. We have panelists who need to leave, so I'll open the floor to your contributions. I'd like to hear from young people, and to focus this so that our panelists can leave on time. Please ask questions. Please, no comments, just questions, so we can make the most of the experiences and expertise here, and which can also further inform the bank's Jobs for Youth strategy. The hands I'm seeing up are from older people. So I'd like young people. Kelvin, did you have your hand up? Yes, please stand up. Microphone to Kelvin, please. We'll take 3 questions. You're not young. 26, you look older than that. You're well nourished. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Kelvin Doe. I'm from Sierra Leone. I'm a self-taught innovator. When I entered the room, I was hoping to see more young people, part of the meeting, but it was rather unfortunate. So many times I attend conferences pertaining supporting young people, but I think what is missing is how are we committed in terms of involving the actual young people that we are discussing about, for them to be able to raise points that can contribute towards solving national development. I think that is what is missing. And from what Mr. Mo Ibrahim said, I was fortunate to be in the same magazine, The Most African Influential 2014. I was fortunate to be in that category with Mr. Mo Ibrahim. And you see, he mentioned, yes, he mentioned how can young people be part of development when we are always, engaged into finding X always in the classroom. It's so quite obvious, because there is not the time and also a space wherein young people can be able to go after school and then think after school to now come and say, I need to be part of this development. What is the best way for me to contribute? I think those are some of the things that we need to look into and see how best we can, create jobs and opportunities for young people.
Thank you very much, Kelvin.
You're welcome.
Behind you, the young woman.
Good evening. Apologies for my voice. My name is Jamila Abdullahi. I'm from Ghana, founder of Circumspect.com. I have a question with regards to regional integration. We go to many conferences like this where we talk about regional integration, and yet we never seem to talk about it when it comes to African youth. So if we're trying to get African youth to create more jobs, to create businesses, to be involved in policy making, and we do not nurture a sense of regional integration or a Pan-Africanism within and amongst us, aren't we backtracking? Like that, once the jobs are created, am I still going to be thinking about creating jobs just in Accra? Or am I going to be thinking about creating jobs that can be scaled up across West Africa?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamila. The gentleman in the front. Please stand so we can see you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask my question in French to be more comfortable?
Yes.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Donc, je m'appelle Sobel Ngom, j'ai effectivement 26 ans. Je suis le fondateur de Social Change Factory, un centre de leadership civique pour les jeunes, basé au Sénégal et œuvrant en Côte d'Ivoire et en Guinée. L'axe sur lequel j'aimerais vous poser une question, messieurs et madame, c'est l'état d'esprit le mindset. Aujourd'hui, je pense qu'il y a un grand défi auprès de nos jeunes sur l'état d'esprit africain à adopter. Et je pense que vous l'avez tous abordé, notamment M. Ibrahim. Comment peut-on faire aujourd'hui, au-delà des projets de développement économique et de formation, pour cultiver l'esprit, pour que nous arrivions à penser africain, à manger, à consommer et à aimer africain? Parce que je pense que c'est aussi à travers ça que nous allons réussir à créer...
You've made your point, I think.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Let's give one or two more people the opportunity to
Okay.
ask questions so that they can respond to them, and those who need to leave. Okay, go ahead. This should be interesting.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bolan Li, and I'm from China. So over the past years, I've been involved with several youth frameworks with the UN system and also other entities. And I've got a chance to work with and learn from many very talented young entrepreneurs in Africa, actually. And I think Mr. Tony has covered a bit of my question about the young entrepreneurs. And, you know, many of them are actually facing the problem with accessing finance and also getting mentorship and support. So from the point of view of the young entrepreneurs in Africa, when they are trying to get started the enterprises, or when they already started enterprises are in a vulnerable situation to strengthen the enterprise, what are the tangible programs and specific steps they can seek help from the ADB, the governments, and also other partners? And the question for Mr. Tony, what's your plan with the 98% of young entrepreneurs who fail to apply for your program? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's close it for now, and let the panelists address what we have so far. So Kelvin's was really a comment, thinking that we aren't involving youth enough, but also the point about educational policy and not allowing young people time and space to innovate. I think that might be one for you, Dr. Lopez. Jamila and the man from Senegal, the businessman from Senegal, the 26-year-old, spoke to the same issue, really, Pan-Africanism, that we seem to be ignoring that as we talk about the youth. And then from China, specific questions about accessing finance from the bank's perspective. And then Mr. Lumelu, what you do with the people who don't make it into your program. So if we start then with educational policies, Dr. Lopez.
Yes. Well, as I pointed out, and I think reinforced by the comment, there is a need for an overhaul of educational policies in the continent, and they have to become much more closer to the needs of the economy. That's not the case. There are a few exceptions of countries that have been very astute in the way they have transformed their educational policies over the last 5 years, but they are not that many, and the examples are far apart. Let's just take one example, which is the need for agro-business, agro-processing. Huge in the continent and one of the major entry points for industrialization. We import about 83% of the processed food we consume in the continent, which is a disgrace. Because we are talking about, making yogurt and packaging rice and stuff like that. These are incredible opportunities, but have we put in place the vocational training and other tools that will allow for entrepreneurs to have the ecosystem that will make these opportunities for jobs? And we don't have many examples that are positive. And I think a lot of it has also to do with the question on Pan-Africanism. Very often we measure regional integration in terms of trade. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's very partial, because trade is just one element of regional integration. We have just published ADB, Economic Commission for Africa and African Union, a regional integration index that has 30 elements, and one of the elements has been mentioned indirectly, which is human mobility. How can Africans actually become mobile within the continent? And we are basically making sure that people understand regional integration in its complexity and its comprehensiveness. And this is relevant because I always say, if you look at the top tier, and this is just the elite part of the discussion, but it's very revealing. How many Chinese universities are in the top 200 of the various rankings? It's five universities for the entire China. How many do you think are from Africa? One, which is not bad. But how do we go to make a few more African institutions in that tier? Are we going to do it by multiplying the various investments we are doing country by country? Or we need on something like this also regional integration and have poles that serve a multitude of countries? I have no doubt that's the way to go. But this is not right now part of the discussion because we focus too much on trade and not on the other dimensions like education.
Thank you. President Chino, Pan-Africanism in your strategy?
Well, let me say this has been an extremely rich discussions, and I just want to comment on one or two things, not necessarily on that one. I just want to say that there must be a sense of urgency in solving the problem that we have. Because if we don't, we saw what happened in Tunisia, what happened in Egypt, the Arab Spring and all of that. Honestly, I think what we need to do is to accelerate on job creation programs, skills development. I like what the minister was saying here about the funds for young people to be able to put their businesses to work. The future of Africa can only be remembered or spelt. Jobs, jobs, and jobs for the youth. I can't emphasize that enough. We've got to be faster at dealing with this particular problem. Even on the issue we talk about industrial development, there are two opportunities here. First is for the jobs that are supposed to come to Africa as China externalizes many of its light manufacturing. I think Carlos was beginning to talk to some of that. But at the end of the day, if those light manufacturing industries come, we've got to make sure that our young people have the skills to be able to take those jobs. And that we actually have also the readiness index on investing in energy and infrastructure and things that make sure that Africa takes advantage of those industries as they come. Because we've got to create jobs. Then the other one is the jobs of the future. And the jobs of the future requires a different set of skills. Unfortunately, in the jobs of the future, and I think the fourth industrial revolution, whether Carlos wants to give it a different name or not, but what is clear is that your neighbor in the job place is more likely to be a robot, not a person. And so there is a real risk that the level of unemployment we have, and this is coming today, it's not in the future, it's actually happening. As you have automation, robotics, and all of these things, has implications for what will happen in Africa. So I think, as you see in the strategy that we have from the African Development Bank, we are upping the game on skills development, retooling our young population to be able to have the skills necessary for those jobs of the future that are coming. The issue is not going to be really the degree you got. It's going to be the skills you have. We are very good in Africa in giving labels. Bachelor's in this, master's in this, PhD in that. No, those are labels. They are not competencies. And so what we need to do is to make sure we are building the competencies that allows us, our young people, to get jobs. And I'd just like to address the issue of consultation that you raised. I think when we were, I'm delighted with this session, when we were developing the youth strategy, we actually had lots of, conversation in different cities with young people just like this, asking them, what would you like to see? What kind of skills do you need? And I think that that's very important because it's not a top-down thing at all. And as president of the bank, as we roll this out, I commit myself that I will have more forums like this, directly interfacing with young people, because I really think we've got to get this right. We have to get it right. And that's what when I said in my remarks that you will find the bank closer to you. As the president of the bank, I commit myself to that because we want to make sure we're listening to you. So let me just say that the mindset, yes, we have to change the mindset. But the greatest mindset shift is to have confidence in yourself. And I think if you have confidence in yourself and you have a little bit of support, you can succeed. I don't want Africa's youth being labeled. They have talent, they have the ambition, they have the passion. They just need our support. But they don't need those jobs in the future. They need it now, because that future is not what they are talking about. They want jobs now, and we must accelerate government, the bank, and everybody else to fast-track job creation on this continent. That is where the resilience of Africa's economy lies in. It's the most urgent thing we've got to do, and we have to do it now, not later. Thank you.
Mr. Limulu, there was a specific question for you, what you do with the people who don't make it into your program.
It's honestly a pathetic situation. We are even contemplating whether we need to create more awareness next year, because out of 85,000 people who have applied for the 2 years we've been running, we selected just 2,000. That's very, very poor. And this issue of youth unemployment is a major issue for the continent. Young people need a helping hand. They need the kind of helping hand that will make them self-reliant, self-confident, and be in a position to contribute their own quota in developing the continent. And they indeed do have a lot of ideas. And so what we are doing is that we're engaging and reaching out to others. Today, the CEO of my foundation here met with Dr. Adesina's team, AFDB team, to see how we can expand it, how African Development Bank can participate. I mean, working with different countries and picking successful candidates from different countries and supporting them. That is one way we can actually translate our talk to action. I also like to see our development partners who have been, in fairness to them, who have the heart of Africa, who want to help Africa succeed, but who need to and must reevaluate the way they engage with Africa in this area in the 21st century and begin to intervene in a manner that helps to create self-reliance so that people do not keep waiting for handouts forever. If we help look at the whole long list and take some, or even other schemes, I think entrepreneurship has proven to be a clear way to create the kind of, address the kind of unemployment situation we have in the continent. And finally, let me say that access to power, access to electricity is so key in dealing with the issue of unemployment on our continent. And I want to commend the African Development Bank for the power deal, which was launched. And I hope that, again, with fellow private sector people, we need to rally and support this initiative because it speaks to the crux of how we can fundamentally deal with the issue of job creation for our youth. And our governments, we can't stop calling on government to please help us look at policies. Last week, I was in Uganda, and I took the 28 million entrepreneurs to meet the president of Uganda. And they had an interaction with the president, and we were telling the president things that affect them. One of them raised the issue of tax, multiple taxation. One talked about, ease of getting certain corporations as such a government authorization. So we need our government to realize that they alone cannot create jobs. Okay. And that to create jobs, they need the support of the private sector, especially the small and medium-scale enterprises, and they need to own the problems and challenges that these people face, because if they deal with the problems of SMEs, they actually are helping to deal with the problems of society. In the 21st century, our leaders need to help us in this manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lumelu.
to make the life of Tenuli very easy. I would say that the bank, you had conversations, we take the engagement to help you to scale this up because you're doing a fantastic job. I'm very proud of what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I would normally ask the other panelists to, give us their final thoughts, but we're running out of time. And as I said, 2 people need to have flights to catch. And so I'm sorry if we didn't get to you with your questions because our panelists have to leave. We can carry on engaging. We still have a couple of days to go on this. The bank is committed to Jobs for African Youth. This is the second of a number of engagements on the Jobs for African Youth strategy. And so to close this session, Excellencies, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank our distinguished panelists for your time and your willingness to share your experiences. To close, I would like to ask President Adesina to tell us how this strategy will progress given everything we've heard this evening.
Actually, I would like to say that, but I would like Sunita. Is Sunita here?
Yes, she is. Just
Where
here.
is she?
Just here.
Yeah, she's the one doing the job, so let her tell us. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests. The ambition we have set for ourselves here, we're going to be rolling out with the countries, with our partners. We're going to be engaging with the private sector, with the civil society, with the youth themselves, whom we have invited here today. So the next steps are for us to work with you to create these jobs that the President has committed to. And there are ways of doing that, and we want to hear more, because it has to be really a model that works for you. What we're doing here is committing ourselves to work with you, and that is going to be our pledge for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sunita. And so to close our discussion, I started with Charles Dickens, so I'll end with Charles Dickens. We are in the epoch of belief, the spring of hope for our continent, and we have everything laid out before us. My name is Udwa Kamimo. Thank you for your time and attention.